All right, just a piece of housekeeping up front. That clock, believe it or not, the minute hand works. The hour hand is off. It's 2 hours slow. So can you hear me now? Right? I've got a mic on, so hopefully you can hear me okay. We are going to hold you guys here until 11:18. Okay, so you should know where you're going immediately after that. We will dismiss you with your teachers so that we don't have a free-for-all when you leave. But we're giving this period a little bit longer time today for our two guest speakers. And before I introduce you to who they are, I want to reinforce what the most important thing you're going to do today is. So about 20 years ago, I had a chance to meet the college baseball coaches from the national championship winning team, not from 1 year, but from 3 out of 4 years, from Louisiana State University. The head coach's name was Skip Burtman. And the coach was telling a story about a player that he was trying to recruit. He was the best pitcher in Florida, the state of Florida that year, threw about 90 miles an hour, and a lot of colleges had wanted him to come and play for them, but he was going to turn pro. So his father, when Skip Burtman went to meet with him, said, "Why should my son come to play with you?" And the coach said, "Because I'll make him better. If he comes to us, he will be a much better player, and in the long run, by the time he turns pro, he'll make more money." So he was the only college coach that said that. Every other college coach said, "He's already good enough, and he'll come in and be our best pitcher." They already knew that. So long story short, the player decides to go to Louisiana State University. His first year doesn't really listen too much to the coach because he's always been the best player there ever was. Coach is trying to teach him, and the kid doesn't listen. So he does okay as a college pitcher. He wins about as many games as he loses, goes through his whole freshman year, kind of average, doesn't get a lot of looks from professional scouts, and then his sophomore year rolls around, and he goes through the fall and the same kind of thing, and he's getting upset with his coach because, "Coach," he said, "I thought you'd make me better." And meanwhile, for the last year and a half, every time this kid pitched, the coach would walk up to him and say, "I want you to try this one teeny tiny little thing," and guess what he did not do? He never tried it. Not once. So after a year and a half, he said, "Well, what do I have to lose? I'll finally try it." This kid who was throwing 90 miles an hour, in a matter of about 10 minutes, started throwing 95 miles an hour. Long story short, at the end of his sophomore year, he was drafted into Major League Baseball by the Detroit Tigers, signed a professional contract for $5 million a year more than what he was offered after his high school senior year. And the funny part of the story is, the college player, when immediately after he tried that one little thing that his coach told him, he came back to the coach after the third inning of the game he was pitching in, and he said, "Coach, how come you didn't tell me that 18 months ago, a year and a half ago when I first came here?" And the coach's exact words to him were this. He said, "I did, you just didn't listen." So I'm there and I'm listening to this coach tell this story. And the next words out of the coach's mouth were, the moral of this story is that sometime today, somebody will say something to you that will change your life. The question is not whether it will happen, but whether or not you'll be paying attention. So ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're paying attention today. Now let's talk about what that means. That means you're so focused and locked in on our speakers that you are not paying attention to any distractions around you. So let's talk about that first and foremost. If you have any books, pencils, or anything else on your lap, please tuck it underneath your seat. Secondarily, if you want to show the people sitting around you respect, try to hold your comments and your jokes and your funny one-liners and anything else that you might do that might distract them away from being focused on our two speakers. Clear? 7th graders, I am really impressed with how you guys have come into our building. I'm not at all upset, about the way you guys have conducted yourselves up until this point. But a funny thing happens right about now. 7th graders start to figure out, hey, guess what? In not too long, I'm going to be the big kid in the building because our 8th graders are going to leave. And you guys know the routines, you know the schedules, you know how to get from place to place. So pretty soon you start to be complacent, you start to fall into routines, and you stop being the leaders that you guys were when you came in as 6th graders. And what we want you guys to understand is that as you are transitioning to the end of 7th grade and you are transitioning into 8th grade, we want you guys to be the same leaders that you've been for the last year and a half for the next year and a half. Fair enough? All right, so I want you to think in terms today of all the stuff you're about to hear. What does it mean for me as I think about my leadership and what I bring to my friends, to myself, to my teachers, to my family, and to my community? And without any further ado, which means I'm going to turn the presentation over, I'd like to introduce two very talented individuals. And every time I have a chance to listen to them, I find myself like my mind is like blown, like whoosh kind of thing, right? And I think about things that I never thought about. They teach me perspective every time I listen to them. So please help me in welcoming Mr. John Robinson and Mr. Doug Hamlin.
Morning. Pathetic.
Wow.
Good morning. Good morning. Come on, we can do one better. Good morning. Good morning. Now they can hear you at the high school. It's great to be here. As was said, my name is John Robinson, and this is Doug Hamlin. We run a company called Our Ability, and we're proud to do that. And we're going to talk to you for a little while and share some stories with you and overcome some obstacles, talking about overcoming obstacles, including the technology problem that we have right now. We're going to talk to you about a lot of things. But first and foremost, what's most important is getting to know you. So we will share stories of who we are, whether the technology works or not. We also want to get to know who you are. So at the end of this, there will be a time where we'll be able to ask and answer questions, because that's what's very important. I want to ask you a question right off the bat and ask you, how many of you looked in the mirror this morning before you left the house? Raise your hand. All of your hands are up. What were you looking for when you looked in the mirror this morning? Who said clothes? How many of you were looking for your clothes? Hair? Spinach in your teeth? Who ate spinach last night? 3 people ate spinach. Nobody likes spinach. You were looking, what were you looking for though specifically when you were looking in the mirror?
If there was any water on me, instead of the shower.
Water on you? Right.
How much gel I have in my hair?
How much gel you have in your hair's rocking right now, dude. It's looking good. You were looking for what's wrong with you, weren't you? Right before you leave the house, right before you start your day, right before you interact with your peers, your teachers, your parents, whomever, you look in the mirror one last time and you see, oh, what's wrong with me? But what if you ask your best friend? What if you ask your very best friend in life, who's probably sitting in this room, and you say, how do I look today? What are they going to say? Great. They're going to say you look great. Why is that?
They're your best friend and they don't want to hurt your feelings.
They don't want to hurt your feelings. That might be part of it. Why wouldn't they want to hurt your feelings? Go ahead, dude.
Only establish social
Social. Your best friends, though. So at a certain point, social's going to be out of it, right? Your best friend knows you better than anybody else. It's because they love you. Your best friend, whomever it is, has stopped worrying about if there's spinach in your teeth or hair out of place or water on your shirt or whatever it is. Your best friend has stopped looking for what's wrong with you and started to love you for who you are inside. Imagine what we could do together if we look in the mirror tomorrow morning and see, oh my goodness, not what's wrong with me, but what does my best friend see about me that's so good? Imagine what you could do. Why do I know that? Because for the longest time, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I was uncomfortable with how I looked when I saw myself. I was in video production for 20 years, never looking at myself on video. But I've learned through a series of conversations with my best friends, with my wife, with my children, that you know what? I am not only more than just no arms and no legs, but I have something to offer. I've started to listen to those conversations with my best friends. and realize that I have so much more to offer in life. I'm going to share some of those stories with you in a minute, but I'm going to challenge you that tomorrow morning, yes, look and see if there's water on your shirt. Look and see if your hair's okay. But right after that, I want you to look in the mirror and say, what's good about me? What does my best friend see? Because if you can accomplish so much more. I've had a lifetime of learning and doing it. So I'm going to challenge you tomorrow morning to look in the mirror differently. Now, what do I see when I look in the mirror? I see a business owner. I own a company called Our Ability, which Doug and I run, and we're proud to do that. We mentor people with disabilities towards education and employment all over the world. Because when I was your age, I did not know another person with a disability. I didn't meet another person with a disability until I was in college. I didn't meet somebody my own height, a little person, until I was 26 years old. I had no role model, no mentor to ask, how can I do it? So Our Ability does that. We mentor people towards education and employment. I'm active in town here. I'm active in my community, active in my church. I'm proud of all those things. I am also married. Andrea and I have been married for 21 years. And I share that with you because it's one of those questions you might wonder. Did he find a girlfriend? Did he find a wife? Does he have a family? So I answer that question out front that, yes, despite what I look like, I have found someone to share my life with. So I volunteer that so you could ask a question about that after. So I'm all of these things. Oh, by the way, we're parents. We have 3 children. We have a 25-year-old son who some 15 years ago was a 6th grader right in that seat. We have a 17-year-old daughter who is about to graduate from Doane Stewart as a senior. And we have a 6th grader that goes to this very school. And so we have 3 children. And that's another thing you're going to wonder, did he have a family? I'm all of these things, but I'm also, quite obvious to those of you that can see me, a congenital amputee. I stand 3 feet 9 inches tall. If you can see me, you notice that I was born without the extension of my arms and my legs. My arms end at where your elbows are. So no elbow, no forearm, no hand, no wrist, no fingers. But I can tell you in my mind, I'm blessed to have this body. Because in my mind, I have the sensation of what it would be like to have hands. I'm moving the muscles that would have turned into hands and fingers at the end of my arms. If you can see me in the front row, you notice that I'm moving the muscles in the end of my arms. So I have that sensation. I wouldn't trade that for anything. I know what it's like in my mind to point at you or make a fist or give the middle finger driving. I know what it's like. Sorry, Gracie, I'll do it over here. How's that? Give the middle finger driving. I know what it's like, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. At the end of my arm, I have these sort of fatty tissues that would have turned into thumbs. There's a bigger one on my left arm and a smaller one on my right arm. And I want to tell you a story about this one. First day of college, freshman in college, 17 years old, 1986. I meet the very best friends of my life that I've ever met in my life. They're the godparents to our children now, and I'm blessed to have them in my life. But one of my friends, he took a different approach with me. He must have heard that there was somebody that looked a little bit different in the dorm. And so he knocked on the door of my dorm room, opened up the door, took a look at me up and down, didn't say a word, and walked out. I said, all right, this is weird. He comes back 5 minutes later, doesn't knock on the door this time, walks in the door, he goes, John, my name is Pat. I said, nice to meet you, Pat. I said, great. He goes, nice to meet you, but he doesn't really want to meet me. He starts walking over, and he's getting as close as he can to me, and he looks down and he says, John, can I touch the end of your arm? I'm really curious about what that thing is on the end of your arm. And before I can say no, he's got the fatty tissue in his hand, and he's poking it, and he's folding it over, and he's trying to pull it off me, and he's squeezing it, and he goes, that feels like a marshmallow. I said, a marshmallow? He goes, yeah, it feels like a marshmallow. So this has been the marshmallow ever since that day to all of our friends, to my children, to our children, I'm sure to our grandchildren. But as he's holding the marshmallow and not letting go, which now is getting creepy, He says, John, take a look at the scar tissue around the marshmallow. I said, Pat, I've had it ever since the day I was born. He goes, no, you haven't. He goes, John, take a look at that scar tissue. Let me ask you a question. When did your parents have that surgically attached to you after you were born? I said, Pat, what are you talking about? He goes, clearly, I've seen TV shows about this. They reattach limbs. He goes, they clearly put that marshmallow back on so you could open doors, carry books. I've been watching you around campus. I said, Pat, you're stalking me? I said, Pat, I've had this ever since the day I was born. He does not believe me. We lived together for 3.5 years, and college graduation rolls around. The night before we graduate, we have a big party in our house, and we're living with 8 guys, and we have a lot of close friends there this last night. And we're inviting our family, parents and siblings and brothers and sisters, and it's the last time we're all going to say goodbye. And all of a sudden, I'm not paying attention, and there's Pat. He's got my mom cornered in the back corner, and I can't get there fast enough. And I hear Pat say, Mrs. Robinson, tell me the truth. When did you have the marshmallow surgically attached to John? My mom doesn't miss a beat. She looks at Pat square in the face and she says, Pat, don't you ever tell John this. It's a secret. But we did have the marshmallow surgically attached after he was born. I knew it, he said. And he comes running over and grabs me and throws me on the floor and squeezing the marshmallow. And I look up from the floor at my mom and I said, Mom, why on earth did you tell him that? She said, I had to. It was so much fun. He believed it. He still believes it. I was born with the marshmallow. It would have turned into a thumb. And I know that because I'm moving a thumb in my mind. My legs are different altogether. They're the lower part of your leg. I have a foot facing forward. Thank goodness I can put shoes on. I can walk. A lot of congenital amputees that are born with leg deformities, the feet are facing backward at birth, and the feet are amputated. I'm lucky to have feet that I can put shoes on. Ankle, lower part of my leg, but no knee and no upper part. And if you see a skeleton in science class or an x-ray of yourself, you know that your hip ball and joint fit snugly together. Mine do not. There's about a 2-inch gap from where the hip area is and the bone. And that's created a very interesting and painful dynamic. Because when I was a freshman in college, I used to stand 3 feet 11 inches tall. But today I stand 3 feet 9 inches or below. And it's because that bone in my leg is riding up. And it's very painful. But you know what? I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm blessed to have this body. I'm blessed to be who I see in the mirror every day. And I'm blessed to be able to share some of this with you. Now I'd like to introduce you to a good friend of mine whose disability isn't at birth. He's a good friend of mine that we run this business together. His name is Doug Hamlin.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Really? We got to do this again? Good morning, everyone. Good morning. There we go. Thank you. So I can assure you this morning when I looked in the mirror, I was not worried about how my hair looked. But I did look in the mirror. I lived 3 hours away, so it was 5 o'clock this morning when I looked in the mirror. And I saw all the same things that I hope my wife sees every day. John's right. I was not born with a disability. I acquired mine as a gift along the way. I grew up in a little town called Endicott, New York, about 2 hours west of here, in a neighborhood a lot like the ones you see around here, suburban area. My dad worked for IBM. And I was an athlete in school, probably starting in middle school. I was on the swim team and the diving team. I was exceptionally mediocre at soccer and tennis, so I didn't do those for very long. But I had a very, I would say, normal upbringing in a suburban middle-class household. And I saw some things that gave me a vision of what I wanted my future to be, not the least of which was my dad going to work in a tie every morning. For those of you who are far too young to remember, and that means all of you, back in the day, working at IBM meant you wore a dark tie and a white shirt to work every day. That became a very important part of what I saw as defining success. And so I knew I wanted to be successful, and I knew I wanted to someday wear a tie to work. I went to college right here in Albany at the university in 1978, and met my wife with the person that would become my wife. Her name is Pam there, and I got a degree in geography. And when you get a degree in geography, it means you go right to grad school, because nobody does anything with a degree in geography. So I went to graduate school, and I got my first job. A guy named Roger hired me, a very good friend of mine now. And also, that first year in grad school, it's 1983 now, I went to a backyard party in Buffalo. It was my sister's birthday. And I went out to help her celebrate her birthday. And there was a trampoline in the backyard. Now, like I said, I was a diver in high school on the swim team. So I'd done a fair amount of work on trampolines, and I thought I knew what I was doing. But I'll be honest, I was showing off. And I got inverted. I was upside down, up in the air, and I came right down on my head in the middle of the trampoline. And I broke my neck in 3 places. So I've got a spinal cord injury. I was 23 years old when this happened, so I was just out of college. And all 4 limbs are affected, so I'm technically what they call a quadriplegic. You've probably heard that word. I'm a very, very fortunate one. And I'm going to talk about my good fortune a few times here. And getting hurt was one of those things that I found to be, in hindsight, a very part of good fortune in my life. I have what's called an incomplete injury, which means the spinal cord, and you might be familiar with how the spinal cord works. It's kind of the internet inside your body that sends messages to all your limbs. When your brain wants your arm to move, your brain says, move arm, and your arm moves. That message actually goes through your spinal cord up and down your back. Mine, like I said, is an incomplete injury, which means that spinal cord was not cut in half. There's not a slice in it. It's got a bruise on it. That bruise kind of interrupts those messages, some of them, not all of them. But interrupts enough of them such that my legs don't work. My right arm is 100%. I can do this with this hand. My left arm is about 90%, and I can't do that with that hand at all. That's about all I can do with that hand. So you have some idea that the injury is kind of what they call asymmetric. My right side is different than my left side. As a matter of fact, it was such an incomplete injury and such a minor bruise to my spinal cord. My doctor walked into the hospital room one day holding the x-ray, and he said, I got to tell you, Doug, I don't see much wrong here. And I said, well, I can assure you there's something wrong here, because I couldn't move my arms and my legs. And I knew the minute it happened, I was lying on the trampoline, that my life had changed. I didn't know exactly what that meant, but I knew suddenly I couldn't move. At that point, I couldn't move either my arms or my legs. And I got my first ride in a helicopter on the way to the hospital. That was a thrill. And I ended up staying in the hospital for 3 months. It's a long time. And, you know, I started out at the beginning staring at the ceiling, wondering what my life was going to be like. And I realized then, and I learned something in those 3 months that has helped me ever since, and that is I learned how to ask for help, which was very, very uncomfortable. Up until then, I was a very independent young man, had a job, I rode my bike everywhere. I didn't need a lot of help. I could do things on my own. Suddenly, I needed help. And learning how to ask for help was one of the hardest, yet one of the most important things that I could do while I was in the hospital. The other thing I learned about myself is that at some point, I realized no matter how much help I asked for, there was only one person that could do the work that needed to be done to get me out of that hospital bed, and that was me. That didn't come quickly. It came about 6 or 8 weeks in, but I literally woke up one day and I realized that I was the only person that could put the work in the gym to get myself out of that hospital bed and back to the office. I told you about my friend Roger. My friend Roger stopped by and saw me one time while I was in the hospital and told me that my job was waiting for me whenever I got out of the hospital, and I was able to go back to it. That was right here in Del Mar, right up on Delaware Avenue was our office. I ended up not only going back to work for Roger that April 4th in 1984, I ended up working there 28 years and owning the company by the end of that. It was a great run, and I never ever would have been able to do that had I not met Roger and had I not realized that I needed to do the work to get out of that hospital bed. Like I said, I'm married. We were not blessed with kids. We've been married 32 years. I was hurt 33 years ago. We actually got engaged while I was in the hospital, which was unique for the people in the hospital. It was kind of a fun little treat for them. I met John, what, 6 or 7 years ago now. And John convinced me I had a disability. I was convinced I didn't. And I was a little disturbed that John told me I had a disability, because I thought that I had overcome this thing and that I was going to live my life differently. And John convinced me that I had a message to tell people. And it took me a long time to realize that. And I hope that I can share with people my story and my experience and help them understand that what they need to do every once in a while is ask for help and do the work and be the ones to sort of own who you are and own who you can be. And John's helped me do that and helped me realize that that can now be part of my life. I'm retired from that company. I was able to sell that to another company, and I now work with John, hopefully sending a positive message to whoever wants to hear it. Dr. Robinson.
How many of you think you have obstacles that you have to overcome in everyday life? A lot of your hands are up. Some of those obstacles, do they worry you? Do they bother you? Do you think you'll ever get through them? You will. Let me tell you a secret. The secret is that every obstacle in life is an opportunity. Now, I'm going to advance this slide, and I'm going to hope it works. But every obstacle in life is an opportunity, right? When I look at myself in the mirror in the morning, I could say to myself, oh my goodness, how am I going to do whatever it is? But I've learned that it's not, oh my goodness, how am I going to? It's what opportunity lies after that. If you remember one thing from my talk, and I'm going to ask the teachers and guidance counselors to use this sentence, it's this. The one thing I want you to remember is oftentimes opportunities are disguised as challenges. See, it's gone. It's already gone. Oftentimes,
it's a challenge, John.
Opportunities are disguised as challenges. See, you may think you can't overcome an obstacle that stands in your way, but you can. And I'm here as proof, and Doug is here as proof that you can do it. What are some of those obstacles that I've had to overcome? I'll give you an example quickly. I wore artificial arms and legs growing up until I was in 7th grade. If I fell down, I couldn't get up. I'd hit myself in the face with the artificial arm all the time, thinking that I was opening and closing the hand. And in 7th grade, decided life was better without it. Another obstacle was learning how to get dressed. It took me a long time to learn to get dressed. When I was your age, I'd have to go to the principal for help in the bathroom every day. How many of you would want to do that? Usually I look at the principal, they don't want to do it either. I learned how to get dressed. As I stand here today, it takes me 30 minutes to get dressed, even at 46 years old. If I'm wearing a necktie, it takes me 45 minutes to get dressed. But you know what? It's an opportunity to prove to me and to others that I want to look this way. I don't want to wear sweatpants. I don't want to sit at home. I don't want to collect Social Security. I want to be a tax-paying citizen. I want to dress for work, and I want to go to work. I drive. There's another opportunity. I drive a Toyota Tacoma pickup truck. I love my pickup truck. I love watching you watch me get in and out of my pickup truck. I have had some fun with it. Pull up to stoplights, unroll the windows, and stick my arms out and say, look, no hands. You'd be surprised how fast people get away from me. Doug and I are able to drive because we have right angle hand controls in our vehicle. And I learned to drive when I was 17 years old. And the moment I learned to drive, it changed my life, because I couldn't ride a bicycle like you can at your age. I wasn't as fast as my other friends in 7th grade. When I was in 7th grade, I couldn't run. But you know what? The moment I got my driver's license at 16, I started to see the opportunities that I had in life. That's what looking in the mirror does every morning. I want you to look in the mirror tomorrow not to see what you're missing, not to see what's not there, not to see what's out of place. I want you to see what's possible. I want you to start to ask yourselves, what does my best friend see? Because if you can do it, we can all be better together. Now, I want to ask you a question. Do you remember the first time you rode a bicycle? Raise your hand. My guess, it was probably being pushed by an older brother who wanted to see you fall down. Was it an older sister? Was it a parent who was running behind you and trying to let you go and hoping you pedal fast enough and push you along? And how many of you did it perfectly the first time? A couple of you. I can tell you the times that my wife taught our 3 children to ride a bike. All 3 times, Andrea is teaching our 3 children, Hayden, Ariel, and Owen, to ride a bike. And all 3 times I'm sitting on the front lawn realizing I'll never learn how to do that. It's one of those things that I put away, I didn't let bother me. I didn't see when I looked in the mirror, but the truth of the matter is it did bother me. That while I love my wife dearly, I wanted to be the one to teach my kids to ride a bike. I had a chance to go to London to the Paralympics, which is right after the Olympic Games in 2009, and I got a chance to see some great adaptive sport athletes. When I was your age, there was no adaptive sport. I couldn't sit sled or sit ski. I couldn't sled hockey. I couldn't adaptive sprint run. I couldn't do any of the things that there are now. But I went to London and was jealous and realized these athletes had an opportunity to do something that I didn't do. And I came home from London thinking about how wonderful it would be for your generation to have adaptive sport with other sport. I had an opportunity to go to an adaptive sport organization to see their sit skis, to see their hockey sleds. And I got there into the shed and I was not really interested in skiing. Quite frankly, at 3'8", I'm afraid of heights. So the last thing I want to do is get on a mountain. That's not going to happen. But there in the back of the shed was a 3-wheel recumbent, which means it lies back, hand cycle. My wife had asked me to go over and look at the equipment, and I didn't really think anything of it. But the moment I got into that shed and looked at that hand cycle, I didn't even ask for permission. I jumped up into that bike seat. And I started to push that bike with my arms out of the shed, into the driveway, out into the driveway, and started to bike for the first time in my life. And I get back to the shed, and the woman that runs the organization said, "Would you like to take the hand cycle home?" And this is in 2011, I think it is. Yes, I'd love to take it home. And I bring it home, and I get it out of the truck. And I get it out of the truck and put it in our neighborhood in Glenmont, and I start to hand cycle around our neighborhood, which is a 1-mile block. And before I know it, there are my 2 youngest children on either side of me, Ariel and Owen, teaching me how to bike. And they're laughing their heads off. And I'm crying my eyes out, thinking I'd never have this opportunity. And we get back to our house, bottom of the driveway, I'm drenched in sweat, and I'm really excited. I get off the bike, and my wife says, "Oh, good. I've always wanted to take a little bike trip with you, John." I said, "Good, get on the bike. I can do another mile loop around the neighborhood." She says, "No, I have something bigger planned." She says, "I'm thinking about something down by the river." All right, I know there's a 4-mile loop down by the river. I probably could do that. I've done a mile. I could work up to 4 miles. I said, "What do you have in mind?" And she pulls a book out of her back pocket. She says, "I'm thinking about something a little bit bigger than the Hudson River. I'm thinking about the Erie Canal." "How far is that, Andrea?" I said, "Is it 200 miles or so?" "It's about that to Buffalo." She goes, "No, it's 350 miles along the Erie Canal." I said, "Andrea, there's no way I'm biking New York State. Not happening." She said, John, don't you tell all these kids in the schools that you speak to that they can overcome whatever obstacle that stands in their way? You listen to me? She says, yes. I said, I'll do it, Andrea, if we can do it under two ways. One, that we bring it as a family, that all of us go. Ariel and Owen and Andrea and I go as a family. And two, that we raise awareness for people with disabilities. And she said, absolutely. And so we started to plan that on June 23rd, 2013, we would leave Buffalo, New York. And we got disability advocacy groups along the way. We pulled friends along the way to join us. And we decided we would do this, leaving June 23rd, 2013. And for the 9 months leading up to it, I trained every day. I started with 1 mile, then 2 miles, then 4 miles, then 10 miles, then 20 miles. Doug and I would train here in the streets of Del Mar to be able to bike from Buffalo to Albany. And we were so excited to be able to do it. And we got to Tonawanda, New York, Buffalo, New York, June 23rd, 2013. Never thinking we would get this far, and there we are on June 23rd, ready to go. So that's Andrea over my shoulder, my wife. My daughter on the far right, who's now a senior in high school, and Owen, who's playing air guitar, because that's what you do when the camera's on. You play air guitar. And here we are leaving Tonawanda, New York on the first day. And you know what we didn't know? What we'd gotten ourselves into. Because the trail is long. If you don't think 364 miles is long, it's a long time. We had it built that we would do 17 days that summer on the Erie Canal. And by the end of the first day, we had done 22 miles, and we still had 16 days to go. And there we are on that first day, leaving Tonawanda, New York. And you can see I'm in there, but Doug's in there. I'll let Doug tell his story a little bit. But Doug and his wife Pam joined us in the first year.
So what John didn't tell you is that John and I, as part of running our ability, have a staff meeting every other Friday morning at Mancuso's Luncheonette where we eat a lot of bacon at 8 o'clock on Friday morning. We're
bacon-fueled.
We are bacon-fueled. And John bought me extra bacon one morning, and in a weak moment, I agreed to join him on this crazy Erie Canal ride. I didn't know what I was getting into, like John said, and I figured I had a bike at home. You can see me on the left there, sitting on a yellow bike there, and I thought, well, I've ridden that around the block once or twice. I could probably do this Erie Canal thing too. And so, like John said, we began to train together. Which was a great bonding experience for us. We became better friends by doing that, and we got in shape and got ready to go. I'm going to tell a little story about my experience on this Erie Canal trip, which is the second day, and I think John might have some experience from that second day as well. But one of my jobs on the first Erie Canal trip was to make sure that John's speaking engagements and meetings were set up typically in the evening along the way. So I was kind of, if you will, John's front man. I had to make sure all the right politicians were in the right place and the audience was ready to be talked to, and I was kind of the logistics guy, as well as riding the ride. So we got to the end of the second day, and I realized a couple things. I had the wrong bike. The bike that I had really was designed for a little old lady to ride around the block once or twice a month, not for what I was trying to put it through, and I had undertrained. I simply physically wasn't ready to do this. So we got back to our hotel room, I don't know, it was 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and my wife could tell I was really angry. I was just having a really bad day. I was yelling at myself, I was yelling at the bike, I was throwing things around the room. She said, "What is wrong with you?" And I said, "Well, there are two things wrong with me. First one is, the guy with no arms and no legs is beating me. That's a problem for me. I'm a competitive, athletic guy, and it's really hard to be beat by a guy with no arms and no legs." And she said, "Doug, remember, your no legs don't work either." I said, "Oh yeah, thanks." And the second thing is, I had double booked John that night. I had him he had to be at 2 different places at 6 p.m. And neither audience was interested in changing their schedule. So I said, not only is the guy with no arms and no legs beating me, I'm a crappy logistics guy. So I was having a really, really bad day. And we went to an event that night. And I won't go into great detail about what the event was. But there were 2 little kids there who couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old, in wheelchairs for whatever reason. And I saw them, and they were so excited to see this gentleman, that it wasn't John, to see another gentleman come to speak, one of these Paralympians that John had met. And they were so excited to see him, and it was all, their life was all about seeing that guy that day. And I looked at them and I said to myself, this trip is not about me and what I'm frustrated with and John beating me. It's about giving those 2 kids an opportunity to be as lucky as John and I have been. There they are right there. I looked at them across the room and said, this is really about them. It's not about me. And that made the trip easier for me. It made John beating me easier for me. And it also convinced me that I would train harder next year. But it was really about providing those 2 kids with the opportunity and the good fortune, frankly, that John and I have had. That was a great revelation for me and a really, really important part of the trip for me.
So I told you we ended day 1, 22 miles. Day 2 was 27 miles. It's not on asphalt anymore, it's on stone dust. So if you've ridden a bicycle on dirt or mud, you know that you don't coast at all, you have to keep pushing. So we got onto stone dust on day 22. It's 27 miles. It's 95 degrees. It's the hottest day of the summer. And we set out from Lockport, New York, and head on our way towards Rochester to a town called Albion. And we get to Albion, New York at 3:30 in the afternoon, an hour late, and we know we have an event of people waiting for us. And there we get to Albion, New York, and after all day in the sun and 95-degree heat, I'm dehydrated, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm ready to give up. And we get to Albion, New York, and there were 350 people with disabilities waiting for us. And they said that we were their inspiration. And that was the moment I knew that we were not going to stop. Whether it be day 2, day 17, we were not going to stop. We were going to get all the way to Albany. And when we saw these 2 little boys, their sports heroes aren't Sidney Crosby, Tom Brady, LeBron James. Their sports heroes is a man named Ryan Chalmers, who went to the London Paralympics. I think I said 2009 earlier, it's 2012. Went to the Paralympics and won a gold medal, and he was at this event. And these 2 little boys wore the war paint, tricked out their rides with lights on their wheels, which you can't see, and they were proud to meet their hero. And that was the moment I knew that we were not going to stop. We continued along upstate New York for 17 days, and before we knew it, we had 300, 400, 500 people greeting us along the way. And we got to Albany, New York, 17 days later, rolled into downtown Albany along the Hudson River, and there were 500 people there to greet us. And I thought I would be glad to be off the bike and done. And I was sad that we wouldn't see people with disabilities all along the way. You see, there is very little to inspire those of us that have disability. And if 2 old men can ride a hand cycle across New York State and be part of that, we're proud to do it. But there's so many other ways to be inspired. And there's so many other reasons. Because education and employment is important to all of us, not just those of us in the room, but all of us around. And we got to the end, and a young man who I know well, who has a disability, asked me a very important question. He said, Mr. Robinson, can I speak to you quietly for a minute? And I said, absolutely. He said, Mr. Robinson, when you and Mr. Hamlin do this in 2014, can I join you? I said, what? I'm not doing that again. We did it last year. We did it again. And instead of 17 days, we did it in 11 days. We did 363.4 miles, both of us. Every 1/10 of a mile all along the way. And you know what? It's not about what we can't do. It's not about what we can't do. It's not about what we see that's wrong with us in the mirror. It's what we can do. It's what we see that's right about us. Tomorrow morning, I beg you, Look in the mirror. Check and make sure the clothes fit. Check and make sure the hair's looking good. But then I want you to ask yourself, what does my best friend like about me? Answer it. And then go about your day at school. We both thank you very much for listening. We'd love to answer your questions too.
Because you're not making any distracting noises. You can also hear me because I am projecting my voice. To do that, it's easier if you stand up. So if you have a question, I'm going to ask you to stand up. I'm going to ask you to say your first name. I'm going to ask you to project your voice. If there's somebody way in the back that asks a question, somebody way in the front may not hear it, so these gentlemen will repeat the question, but we're going to ask you to project your voice and be respectful to people with smaller voices by not making any distracting noises. So if you have a question...
There was one over here.
Raise your hand.
There was one in the... There was one in there. Right there, dude. Stand up.
My name is Freddie Mack,
Ready?
and my question is, have you ever got bullied?
Have I ever gotten bullied? Freddie, if I was your age, I would have told you no. Yes. Yes. See, when I was growing up, one of the things that I learned to do really quickly was be with the people that love me. It's part of that mirror analogy, right? I want to see what my best friend sees. But when I was growing up, I had kids that picked on me all the time. All the time. But you know what? What I learned early on was two things. One, that I have stuff about me that I like, and I need to be with the people who like me. What I learned early on was I ignored the people that are picking on me, bullying me. I got away from them and went with the people that love me. And pretty quickly it stopped. Today's day and age with Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and whatever, Snapchat, you know, sometimes you can't get away. But you have to try and get away and go with the people that love you. If you're being bullied, I beg you, do your best to get away from it. Tell somebody about it, but then go with who loves you. We always have somebody that we can be close to. That's who you should be with, not the bullies.
Right over here.
My name's Avery Roach, and where did you guys sleep when you were on the road?
On the road? We did not sleep in the road.
We slept in hotels, except for one night we slept in the first time we slept in the Brockport State dormitories, which if you have a chance to do that in the middle of the summer, don't do it. It's very, very, very hot. But we stayed in hotels almost every night. I happened to live in the middle part of the state, so I was able to stay at home a couple of nights. But we decided not to camp. A lot of people camp when they do that trip. We decided not to do it. Yes, sir. Right there. Yeah.
My name is Hamlin.
So,
How do you guys write?
how do we write? Well, who's going first?
You go ahead.
Pretty early on, my shoulders didn't come together. So when I was 4 or 5 years old, my shoulders started to loosen up. And my parents put a crayon and then a pencil in between my two arms. And so, in kindergarten, I started to learn that way. There was no typing, there were no computers or iPads or whatever when we went to school, so I had to learn how to write. And so I got up to 11th grade doing that, and then my 11th grade history teacher gave us a ton of homework. Hated it. Loved my teacher, but hated the homework, right? So I would come in every morning and mumble and groan about how sore my arm was from holding that pencil doing an hour's worth of writing. And then one day I went up to Mr. Burke and I said, Mr. Burke, look at the welt on my arm that you caused me from doing all that homework. He said, John, look at anybody else's thumb. They all have welts. Get over it. Keep going. And you know what? He was right. So I learned early on to hold a pencil. That's how I brush my teeth. That's how I shave. It's how I eat my food. But putting my arms together works almost like one hand. Go ahead.
Over here?
No, with glasses. Yep. No, you. Yep.
My name
Alexis?
Would you ever do a longer trip?
You don't, 363 miles isn't long enough? Doug?
So I will
do a longer trip?
So I will share this with you. See, it's Mrs. Robinson who's the instigator of this whole thing. And Mrs. Robinson doesn't give you an option. She simply says, you're going to do this. And I'm not even married to her, and I have to do the stuff she says.
I am married to her, and I have to do this stuff.
So she said, and I can't say we have a date for this yet, but last year, not long after we got done with the ride, she said we were going to ride from San Diego to Washington, D.C., which is 3,000 miles. Now, like I said, we don't have a date for that yet, but Mrs. Robinson has said we're going to do it, so I fear we're going to do it. Right there. With the glasses.
I'm Bobby. Do you have any siblings?
I have an older sister. She's 3 years older than I am, and the one thing I will tell you about her, because it fits in with the story of today, like I said, I got hurt on her birthday, the day after her birthday. I was at a birthday party, so she will forever be grateful that I gave her that present. She came to visit me every night I was in the hospital in Buffalo, 91 nights in a row. I heard her heels on the tile in the hospital. And that was something that taught me about the power of someone that loves you and the power of someone that wants to help you. And having her come visit me every night for 91 nights was really special.
Over there. Yep.
I'm curious, how do you drive your truck and you know like people without taking your legs, you can like hand control, but like how do you use your truck?
Same thing. My hand controls are close to the steering wheel, and I can reach them just fine. So the hand controls have helped both of us for different reasons, but to do the same thing. Yep, right there. Go ahead. Well, as a matter of fact, we are. So we're going to leave in June 28th.
June 28th to July 10th.
June 28th to July 10th. We'll do it one more time at least.
My name is PJ. How did you guys originally meet?
How did we meet?
Yeah.
We met boarding an airplane. Even though we lived 1 mile apart from each other here in Delmar, we met boarding an airplane, and I was watching Doug transfer from his chair into the airplane seat. He was watching me do the same thing because we get to board early. And we realized that, and I realized that Doug was somebody that I wanted to get to know. Because if you're going to mentor people with disabilities, there needs to be those of us that can do the mentoring. And so I was proud to do that, PJ. And I'd like to get somebody in the back, because you know what, I've ignored the back. So way in the back, yep, stand up. Shout it out though, dude. Oh, it's not a dude, I can't see. Go. If I say that again, but a little bit louder. That pretended to be my friend and just left me? Well, are they your friend? No. Listen, we're all going through life, right? And some people pretend to be your friend, but if they're truly your friend, they won't leave you. I have had great friends. I have had friends that told me when I was being a jerk. I needed that. But my friends haven't left me. And I wouldn't leave my friends either. It's hard at this age, I will tell you that. It's hard at this age to find who is truly a friend. But when you find them, give them some space to do some things, but be with them. And if you need to try to, hey, Tommy, you're not doing this right. If they don't listen to you, they're not really a friend. So it's okay. It's okay to do that. But if they truly leave you, they're not your friend.
Mr. Cohen, we have our next cruise, or getting ready, lining up.
One last question.
We got one over here.
One that I haven't had.
Let's go over here.
What color shirt?
Right there, blue shirt.
Max?
I was wondering if you wanted to be treated differently, or if you wanted to be treated as everybody else.
Do I want to be treated differently, or do I want to be treated as everybody else? I think Doug and I would both like to be treated as everybody else. The truth of the matter is, and this is what I'll leave all of you on, the truth of the matter is, when you look in the mirror tomorrow, you look different than everybody else. I look different than everybody else. And we have to love what we're different, what makes us different. We have to love what our best friend sees. And then we have to go out and hope that all of us treat each other with love and kindness around us, okay? That's what we can learn from this. Thank you, 7th grade.
Have a great...
Ladies and gentlemen, Doug and John have offered to come back on some future Tuesday and answer more questions. Would you guys be interested in that? Yeah! All right, we'll let you know more about that. Ladies and gentlemen, how do we thank our special guests?
Thank you.
Go Eagle.
We need to move quickly, but we need to move safely and respectfully. So I'm going to ask you right now, if you're in the back and there's somebody in front of you, let them go first. We want you going out the side.
Do you want me to try my computer, John?